Look, I'm with you. Toy Story 3 was the perfect ending to the series. I and everyone else I know was an inconsolable mess after watching it. I don't know why Pixar would try to resurrect the series for another sequel so soon after the last one. At least they had the patience to wait a few years before doing Toy Story 3. You know, if we're not too careful, Toy Story is gonna turn into one of those franchises that just releases a new sequel every 2 years.
9 years.
What?
It comes out next year, so it's gonna be 9 years.
No, that can't be right. I was a senior in high school when Toy Story 3 came out. I'm Andy's age. And if it comes out next year, then I'm gonna be
27. You're old.
Oh my God. Well, I guess it is time for a Toy Story sequel because the world is moving at a breakneck pace and time no longer has any meaning. And while I and a decent amount of you are probably still shook that it's been almost a decade since we last said goodbye to Andy and the rest of the gang, overall we're probably still doing better than a certain character who we saw in the Toy Story 4 teaser.
I don't belong here!
That was Forky, the incredibly confusingly named Spork who took center stage in the teaser. I'm Jacob with Channel Frederator, and today we're gonna do our best to try to figure out what exactly Forky's role in this movie is going to be. Or at the very least, submit our own guess to the possible plot or direction of Toy Story 4. Will the movie focus on how the toys come to life? What are Tom Hanks and Tim Allen going on about when they say in interviews that this is one of the most emotional endings they've ever recorded? And of course, will Forky be the main villain of Toy Story 4? Yes, the Toy Story 4 teaser did drop a couple weeks ago, but I'm not gonna blame you if this is your first time hearing about this. It kinda slipped past some radars because it was released the same day as the Detective Pikachu trailer, which has 4 times more views than the Toy Story teaser, but let's kick Pikachu off the hype train, at least for this week. Maybe we'll come back for him later. Before we get into the meat of it, let's start by looking at the best piece of info we have regarding the plot of Toy Story 4, which is the official synopsis provided in the description of the teaser. It reads,
Woody has always been confident about his place in the world and that his priority is taking care of his kid, whether that's Andy or Bonnie. But when Bonnie adds a reluctant new toy called Forky to her room, a road trip adventure alongside old and new friends will show Woody how big the world can be for a toy.
As for the teaser itself, while it is nice to see everybody again, there's not a whole lot we can take away from it other than, of course, Forky's 2 lines of, "I don't belong here," and "I'm not a toy." Doesn't get much more on the nose than that. Right away, we can discern that Toy Story 4 might explore some questions that they've never really had to before. Namely, what makes a toy? Why do some toys come to life and others don't? Are other inanimate objects able to come to life? There are lots of theories online that come to this conclusion about the teaser, and that also try to find the answers to these questions themselves. And most tend to land on the idea that the toys coming to life is the result of the children's imaginations, which is a completely understandable conclusion to come to. Especially since a spork with googly eyes isn't exactly a mass-produced product like everybody else that we've seen in the series. So the whole children's love and imagination bringing life to the toys works as a solution to this inconsistent thing and just applies this umbrella of logic to all of it. With both of these things in mind, I think we have enough to cobble together a possible narrative for the movie. At some point, Bonnie adds her latest arts and crafts project to her roster of toys. He freaks out similarly to how he does in the teaser and likely runs away, or maybe Bonnie's mom accidentally throws him out, or something to get the toys out of the house and start the road trip adventure to save Forky. As Forky struggles with his purpose in life and his place in the universe, not knowing if he should be a toy or some other non-sentient object, he could be pushed over the edge by a couple of other toys who don't really know what he's got going on. Possibly the toys we see in the second teaser, played by Keegan-Michael Key and Jordan Peele. Since Forky isn't exactly what most people would call a toy, and since Key and Peele look like they're going to be doing the Toy Story version of their valet routine, whose characters aren't exactly known for their subtlety, they might take an antagonistic role and openly mock Forky's existential dilemma, whether they mean to or not. From here, Forky could pull a Lotso and become openly hateful towards other toys who know their place in the world, possibly even joining forces with Key and Peele's Ducky and Bunny. After all, they'd probably feel that their place in the world is unjust as well, since they're carnival toys. This is a pretty open secret, but carnival games are fixed, or at the very least are set up in a way that gives the house an incredible advantage over the player. Those toys aren't really meant to be won. They're meant to be sought out as a potential prize, but never played with. So are they toys or are they decoration? These questions could lead to these 3 going up against our main cast, who all have a pretty clear idea of who they are, especially after their time with Andy. On the other hand, Forky could pull a Jesse, where his dejection concerning his role in the world will ultimately be his downfall if it goes unchecked. Whichever way this movie goes, it will apparently lead to a cry-tastic ending by Tom Hanks and Tim Allen's own admission. Based on the conflict brought up in that teaser, I'm confident that at least one of those story beats is going to make an appearance in Toy Story 4. But let's take all of these ideas that we've thrown against the wall and dig a little deeper. So let's start with the idea that Toy Story 4 might deal much more heavily than the other movies on how the toys might come to life through the imagination of children. I myself don't subscribe to this theory. Firstly, if this is meant to be an explanation as to why some of the toys come to life and why some don't, it seems inconsistent with some of the logic of the previous movies at best, and it just seems like too much bother to get into at worst. For example, in Toy Story 2, we see toys like Wheezy, who were abandoned for months, even by the toys themselves, let alone Andy. It wasn't on purpose, but Wheezy didn't interact with anyone for an extended period, and not for lack of trying. No one could hear him because of his busted squeaker, and yet he remained alive on the shelf. Not to mention, if these theories are true and Toy Story 4 focuses heavily on the whole the children provide the life force of the toys through their imagination theory, do you want midichlorians? Because this is how we get midichlorians. What I mean to say is that while things like the Pixar theory make it easy to forget, all of Pixar's franchises exist independently from one another. Outside of Easter eggs and the Pizza Planet truck, the Pixar franchises aren't related, unless Toy Story 4 turns out to be some sort of secret Pixar Infinity War. Using the internal logic of Pixar's other movies, like Riley's Imagination giving Bing Bong life and Inside Out, probably isn't going to do anything for us when we're trying to predict the new Toy Story. And I think unless Pixar releases some sort of announcement saying that the Pixar theory is in fact canon, we should keep this in mind. Of all of Pixar's movies, the Toy Story franchise, I feel, is one of the ones with the least fantasy elements. Which I know sounds ridiculous when the toys literally come to life, that's a pretty big asterisk, but other Pixar movies make sure to explain how their worlds work, letting slide questions that aren't all that important to the story. The humans can't understand the rats in Ratatouille or the fish in Finding Nemo. Monsters, Inc. and Inside Out have an impressive amount of world building, and hell, even in Brave, the magic is at the very least explained as being magic. Toy Story, on the other hand, has never gone out of its way to explain how the toys come to life. It's just always been that way, like the sun rising in the east, or supers existing within the world of the Incredibles, or Ariel dressing like a Hot Topic exploded on her. I didn't say it was a bad thing! All I'm saying is that how the toys come to life, while a fun question to ponder, probably isn't something most of us actually want answered, and I think Pixar knows that. With that in mind, I feel like Forky's dilemma in the movie won't have much to do with the fact that he shouldn't be alive, or that Bonnie accidentally gave him life through some sort of magical force of love or imagination. Can you tell that that line got away from me? Cause, oh boy, I sure can. More realistically, I think that Forky's existential crisis will deal with the fact that being a spork, he serves two equal purposes as utility and toy, and he'll be caught in the middle, unsure of who he really is. Being a spork is a perfect signifier of that conflict, being equal parts spoon and fork, an idea reinforced by his character poster where he's literally in between a fork and a spoon, the two equal parts that make him who he is. I can't stress this enough because if Forky's main conflict doesn't have anything to do with him being split between his two identities, that of a utensil and a toy, why have this symbolism at all? Why couldn't he just be, I don't know, a spoon? Or a fork? His name is Forky. Why would his name be Forky and then have him be a spork? But even if I'm wrong about everything I've said about Forky up to this point, there is one thing we should investigate. Will he be the main villain of Toy Story 4? Well, I don't know if it's taboo to point this out or not, but as of late, Disney and Pixar seem to have been leaning pretty heavily into this certain trope of the third act villain twist. And while this technique has gotten some flack, I can totally understand why it's used. When it's not completely telegraphed, this twist can do a lot to teach people to not put too much trust into the most charismatic or even the most timid people, especially if they're somebody you're not super familiar with. Keep those kids thinking critically and responsibly, you know? Actually, there's a lot of adults I know that could use those lessons. I'm gonna spoil a few Disney Pixar movies here, but if you're watching this video, I'm gonna assume that you're a fan of cartoons and have probably seen most of these since they all came out at least a year ago, but just in case, timestamp if you want to skip them. Just a couple of examples of the third act villain twist used in the last few years include Hans in Frozen, Bellwether in Zootopia, Callahan in Big Hero 6, Otto in WALL-E, Muntz in Up, Pete in Toy Story 2, and Lotso in Toy Story 3, though his was more of a second act twist. I could go on naming more, but you'll notice that two previous Toy Stories had this twist, so precedents would say that Forky, the new guy, has a pretty good chance of going rogue, even if his turn to the dark side is for sympathetic reasons. On top of that, Forky is being played by Tony Hale, an actor who has a reputation for playing characters that are timid, submissive, or overly eccentric. Buster in Arrested Development, Gary Walsh in Veep, Mr. Noonman in Sanjay and Craig, the dancing guy in that Volkswagen ad, all characters that would fit right in with Forky. So now take what I just said and consider Zootopia's twist. While Jenny Slate might not have the same reputation for her characters as Tony Hale, the character she played in Zootopia was very similar to not only Hale's past roles, but Forky as well, at least until she was revealed as the villain, which shows that it's not always the deceptively charming and charismatic that become the bad guy. And hey, if you want to stretch a bit, Forky also sounds like he has a history of being unstable in the teaser itself. Once he flies into his panic, Woody says,
"Somebody get him before he pokes an eye out,"
which could imply that this is a pretty regular occurrence, or that this sort of meltdown has already happened before. Though your mileage may vary on that point since Woody is the leader and he's the one usually given orders anyway. But regardless of whether Forky becomes the villain of the movie, let's talk about that ending that the cast keeps alluding to. Last week, Tim Allen talked Toy Story with Jimmy Fallon in an interview. He teased the ending and its emotional weight, saying that he couldn't even get through the last scene. He kept checking his script to make sure that there wasn't more to it. He had to turn around when recording his lines, and most intriguingly, he referred to it as a Scarlet I don't give a damn moment. For those who missed the reference, this is a throw to Clark Gable's exit from the 1939 movie Gone with the Wind, where, sick of his tumultuous relationship with Scarlett O'Hara, played by Vivien Leigh, Gable's character, Red Butler, unceremoniously leaves, telling Scarlett,
"Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn."
Now back then, damn was a pretty scandalous word for the moving pictures, but I don't think Tim Allen meant that Woody's gonna swear up a storm at the end of Toy Story 4. Rather, in Gone with the Wind, 79-year-old spoilers by the way, the movie ends right after Rhett leaves, which isn't exactly the high note that you would expect an epically long movie like Gone with the Wind to go out on. The movie doesn't give any closure, and it ends on a bittersweet, ambiguous note that Scarlett will always be chasing what she can't have. After all, tomorrow is another day. Granted, he could just be referencing that scene because he also sees Toy Story 4 as a historic moment in cinema. But if we talk about the ending of Toy Story 4 with this scene in mind, that could give us a lot of insight. If we take that information and compare it to Woody's character poster, his has a more somber look than the others that have been released so far, with Woody tipping his hat and possibly turning away from the audience, much like Gable did in Gone with the Wind. Could the events that transpire with Forky cause Woody to second-guess his place in the world, eventually leading into him leaving the group for good? After all, everybody's been saying that this poster looks an awful lot like a goodbye, though, you know, everybody said the same thing about Toy Story 3. But the last thing to bring up is the music used in the teaser. The song used in the teaser is Joni Mitchell's Both Sides Now, though the teaser itself uses the Judy Collins recording. In short, this is a song about viewing the world through the whimsical eyes of a child, only to grow up and see the world for what it really is as an adult. But most importantly, coming away from life and love, having experienced its highest highs and its lowest lows, and coming to the realization that, despite holding on to your memories and perceptions, there really isn't any greater understanding to be had. The last verse goes like this, but, you know, I'm not gonna sing it. I've looked at life from both sides now, from up and down, and still somehow, it's life's illusions I recall. I really don't know life at all. Now, Toy Story's messages have always been pretty mature, especially when it concerns such core themes of the series like growing up. But the open-ended conclusion of the song, matched with Tim Allen's claim that the end of the movie is a frankly my dear moment, I have a sneaking suspicion that the movie's going to close out Forky's existential dilemma with the conclusion of, I don't know, it's up to you. And this lack of a revelation in a chaotic world could lead to a host of different things, like Forky accepting himself for both sides of who he is, embracing himself as a toy, or maybe even in his death being taken apart at the end of the movie. That said, a less than happy outcome like the last one I said might lead to the noblest of the gang, Woody, to go off on his own and do some soul searching, giving a sense of finality while still leaving the doors open in case Toy Story 5: The Search for More Money is ever greenlit. As for ratings today, we're gonna rate the only thing that we've talked about that we can really quantify with a rating, which is the plausibility of Forky becoming the main antagonist of Toy Story 4. But I don't think I can this time. We're working off just a teaser and what little info we've got, so I'm not super comfortable giving this conspiracy a rating. Hell, Keanu Reeves was just announced as a cast member a few days ago, and it sounds like he might play a John Wick type character. There's a not unreasonable chance that he might turn into the antagonist. Also, if I rate it 4 out of 5 and Forky turns out to be a complete sweetheart, I'm gonna look like a big idiot. I rated 4 Forkies out of 5. Forkies out of 5. Sorry. But what do you think? Do you think that Forky is going to be what ultimately tears the group apart in Toy Story 4, whether through malicious or tragic means? Got any other predictions or theories about how the movie could turn out? Comment below and let us know. The movie doesn't come out until next summer, so we've got a long winter of speculation to get through. And of course, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to click that like button or that subscribe button if you're new here. Once again, I'm Jacob, and never forget, Frederator loves you.